Not every church that shouts fire is calling on God. And not every prophet in white is sent from heaven. Some are sent from places far darker than hell itself. This is the story of a barren woman who walked into a church seeking a miracle. But what she found instead was a doorway to something ancient, evil, and hungry. Before you hear this story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. We share these haunting tales across Africa to preserve the memories that should never be forgotten. If you believe in stories that sting, shock, and linger, subscribe. You won't want to miss the next one. Beyond the noisy city and bustling towns, in a small community in the heart of Lagos, there lived a woman named Abini Folarin. Abini was known for her gentle spirit and kind heart. She was the sort who greeted every neighbor by name and offered cold water to the delivery boys under the sun. But behind her beautiful smile lay a haunting grief. 14 years without a child. It was a silent kind of pain. Despite countless hospital visits, treatments, and prayers, nothing changed. Her husband, Cezanne, still loved her, or at least pretended to. But things weren't the same anymore. There was distance in their laughter, tension in their touch, and silence between their sentences. Abini's younger sister, Tolani, a sharp-minded nurse who lived nearby, often came to check on her. They were close, more like twins than sisters. But even Tolani had grown weary of offering words of hope that felt increasingly hollow. Then, one hot Sunday afternoon, Abini's neighbor knocked on her door with a bright, folded handbill. "They say this woman is healing childless women," she said, pressing the flyer into Abini's palm. "She's holding a crusade this evening at the new open field hall near the waterboard." The flyer was gold and red, the face of a woman printed boldly at the top, Prophetess Grace Adigoké, also known as Mummy Signs and Wonders. Beneath her name were words written in heavy block letters, "Wombs shall open. The time is now." Abini stared at it. "She's healed over 100 women," they said. "You should try," the neighbor added. Abini did not tell her sister. She folded the flyer and slipped it between the pages of her prayer journal. That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting orange shadows across the rooftops, Abini wrapped a scarf around her head and walked to the crusade ground. The field was packed. Rows of plastic chairs filled with desperate men and women. At the center, under a makeshift canopy draped with silver fabric, stood Prophetess Grace, tall, commanding, dressed in flowing white robes. Her voice boomed through the speakers as she called out ailments and performed healings. People screamed, fainted, collapsed. Then, her eyes landed on Abini. "You," she said. "Stand." Abini rose, trembling. The prophetess raised one arm to the sky, eyes shut. "I see a womb that has been sealed for 14 years. The Lord has unlocked it tonight." The crowd erupted. Trumpets blew. Some people wept. Abini staggered backward, shocked. The prophetess continued, "Mark this date, for this woman shall conceive by the next full moon." Abini returned home in a daze. She had become convinced that she was pregnant. Her husband's family suddenly became friendly again. Friends celebrated with her, and even her local church invited her to testify. But things began to change. At night, Abini dreamed of terrible things. She walked through deep rivers with snakes slithering at her feet. In one dream, a mirror with snake carvings appeared in her bedroom. When she woke, sweating, the mirror was really there, hung silently on the wall opposite her bed. But Abini told no one. She stopped going to the hospital for fertility checks. Tolani begged her to get scanned. "Let's confirm the pregnancy," Tolani said. "I already know I'm pregnant. Prophetess Grace said so." "But Abini, you've been bleeding off and on. This is not normal." "The prophetess told me that it's spiritual. She warned not to seek medical things. The baby is not like others." Her belly began to grow, but oddly, round and stiff within weeks, like a drum. Her eyes grew darker. Her laughter sounded different. Tolani grew afraid. One evening, she followed Abini secretly to the prophetess's church, Miracles of Water and Revelations Church, a large tented structure by the waterside, far from the city. She watched from a distance. Inside, women in white chanted. Bowls of water glowed in candlelight. The prophetess stood near a pool that shimmered unnaturally. Abini stood at the center, eyes closed, murmuring. She touched her stomach, which now pulsed like something moved inside it. Tolani left before she was seen. She tried to warn Cézanne, but he brushed it off. Then came the night Abini returned from the church and began to bleed. The floor of their home soaked with blood, but her eyes calm, like she was expecting it. Tolani rushed over. "We have to take her to a hospital." "No," Abini muttered. "They told me it must come this way. They said tonight is the night." But Tolani took her anyway. Inside the emergency room, the nurses whispered. The doctors worked. But what came out of Abini's womb was not a child. And what followed after was stranger than the first miracle. The hospital room smelled of disinfectant, iron, and something else, something foul, like decay. Abini lay on the hospital bed, pale, eyes half open but unseeing. Nurses moved around her silently, faces stiff with confusion. The attending doctor, Dr. Yusuf, turned to Tolani. "There was no baby. What we pulled out, it wasn't human." Tolani flinched. "What do you mean?" Dr. Yusuf hesitated. "There was tissue, yes. But it was discolored, unformed, as if something started growing and then changed. We're sending it to pathology." Abini remained unresponsive. Hours passed. Abini's husband arrived, red-eyed and shaken. When he was told the news, he only stared at the wall, silent and in tears. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the hospital. That same night, while Tolani sat beside Abini's bed, two women in white entered the ward. Their movements were fluid, strange. They claimed they were prayer warriors from the church. "We came to take our sister home," one said. Tolani refused. "She's not going anywhere with you. She needs medical supervision." The two women stepped forward, reaching for Abini. "Don't touch her!" Tolani yelled, grabbing the nearest metal object. The commotion drew nurses and doctors. They rushed in and restrained everyone. Security was called. The two women were removed. Abini had died. The investigation begins. With the help of Dr. Yusuf and Cézanne, Tolani filed a report with the police. She told them everything: the strange prayers, the church services, the miscarriage, the bizarre rituals. It was hard to believe, but the hospital records, Abini's condition, and the women's attempt to remove her body raised enough red flags. One rainy evening, during a so-called deliverance service at the Miracles of Water and Revelations Church, the police acted. Undercover officers had confirmed strange activities. The church, hidden deep in an uncompleted building, near the edge of the lagoon, was full. Inside, the congregation wore white robes. The prophetess stood at the center, arms raised, chanting. Around her, assistants held live snakes. Strange symbols were drawn across the walls. At the altar, a woman screamed, bound to a wooden board. The police burst in. Panic, screams, chaos, but this time, no one escaped. Every exit was blocked. Dozens of followers were arrested, including the prophetess. Officers seized ritual items, robes, and records. Investigators found journals filled with bizarre writings, ritual calendars, lists of names, coded drawings. One locked room revealed bottles filled with dark fluid, remains of rituals. The police also found shallow grave behind the church. Some had bones, The entire nation was horrified. Newspapers carried the headlines for weeks. Radios buzzed with callers sharing their own encounters with strange miracle churches. Past members came forward, confessing things they'd seen but were too afraid to report. At Abini's burial, dozens of women came. Some had known her, others hadn't. But they stood together. The court sentenced several core members of the cult to life in prison. The prophetess was charged with multiple counts of murder, abduction, and unlawful rituals. Her trial was the most talked about case of the year. But the damage was done. Months later, Tolani received a letter. Inside was a note. You closed one gate, but others remain open. That same week, she heard of another church rising in another city. Different name, same robes, different leader, same rituals. Tolani kept the note, burned the envelope. She had done what she could. But evil rarely dies, it only changes form. If you've listened this far, remember, not all lights lead to salvation. Some only blind you to the pit beneath. Share this story. Warn someone. Question the hands that claim to heal. Evil wears many garments, and sometimes it calls itself a miracle.